now that we have these sort of principles, let's look at how you'd go about implementing them, right? So the first challenge we discussed is about well-defined processes, right? The first step in the process is, of course, sourcing. So you go and you talk to all the stakeholders, different hiring managers, they tell you the requirements. The first thing you want to do is to be able to source. Of course, there are multiple channels of sourcing. I've listed a few here. One is just referrals, right? Either internal or external, you have referrals, community postings. So you have shape of work. I would think even of Twitter and so on as communities. So you post there. Of course, there are consultants and recruitment agencies, right? So these are a few channels that may work. But personally, I feel that these are a little difficult to scale, right? They may work on an ad hoc, one-time basis. But if your VP of engineering tells you, I want you to hire 10 front-end developers, very difficult for you to go and do this via referrals or community postings. Consultants is a little different. If you're a large company, what ends up happening is, because you have a large recruitment team, you have different departments working with different consultants. But as a startup, it's a bit difficult for you to have 5 different consultants. So I would again think for a startup, all these are difficult to scale, which leaves us with 2 other channels of recruitment, of sourcing. One is job boards and the other is campus hiring, right? So I say these are scalable because they're repeatable. So the amount of time you would spend to hire, say, 3 people versus how much time you spend to hire 6 people is not very different when it comes to sourcing, right? We have an excellent session coming up on campus hiring. So I don't want to be a trespasser. I will let that happen on its own. We will focus on job boards, right? Within job boards, so of course, there are lots of them, right? So CutShort, InstaHire, and so on. We have found CutShort to be the most effective. Again, talking to customers, that's what they tell us as well. Disclaimer, CutShort is not paying us for this. They're not even giving us a coupon code or whatever, right, for talking about this. But we personally, as well as with our customers, we've seen that CutShort seems to be working very well. Of course, there are other channels like Naukri, LinkedIn. What we have seen is they're way too noisy, right? Maybe CutShort, if you're looking at sort of more frontline sales kinds of roles, it may help. Meatier roles, it's a little difficult. LinkedIn, even if you're not doing the paid posts, you get way too many applicants, right? And it becomes very difficult to sort of shortlist them, especially because they have that easy apply option. Everyone just applies to everything, right? So I personally find LinkedIn quite noisy. Of course, niche job boards exist. We've used HasJob for hiring tech people. We've used Dribble for design. So there are niche job boards. You could probably use Kaggle for data science, things like that. But I still think if you want like a one workhorse, one stable solution, something like CutShort for India, I think works fairly well. Okay. Now that you have done the sourcing, right? Let's look at 2 different scenarios on how the pipeline would go, what the different processes would be like. Okay. So if you have a small volume of people applying, when I say small volume, I'm saying per job role, right? Per position, you have about 20 people who apply for that. Typically, what we recommend that you do is, of those 20, just get on an intro call with all those 20, right? And then maybe you decide 5 of them are not worth it, right? And that reduces to 15. You then probably give them a simple assessment for them to do. That reduces down to about 10 people. And then you give them an assignment. So the assignment could be a larger thing. It could be, take a few days, a case study, a design, something like that. Brings it down to about 5 or 6. You interview these, and then you're left with about 3 people, right? So you started with about 20 people applying, and about 3 people get the offer letter. So you're looking at about 15% as a conversion rate, right? This is, again, small volume we're talking about. At the other extreme is where you have a larger volume, right? With this large volume, we are looking at, say, 100 people applying, right? So there's a couple of positions available, let's say, and 100 people apply. Now, if you look at the previous scenario, what we had was when 20 people were applying, you're actually calling each of those 20. I mean, it could be you or a recruiter or someone, right? But with 100 people, you cannot call all the 100, right? So it becomes, it's not feasible to call all of them. So what we do in this case is you flip. You do the assessment in the beginning and share that assessment with the 100 or so people. That brings it down to, say, 30% of the people who started you then do the intro call, right? Again, this goes back to the principle of the most relevant candidates is whom you want to engage with. You cannot be, if you try doing the call to 100 people, you'll probably do 20 and you get exhausted, right? And your best candidates may be in those 80. So you want to use some system that, again, identifies the best candidates and then deal with them, right? And then the process follows, right? The assessment, you have a conversation, maybe it comes down to 20, then you give them an assignment, and then 3 of them get the offer letter, right? So the conversion here is about 3%, right? So you start with 100 people and then you end with 3 people. Okay, so we looked at sort of 2 extremes and these are coming from the number of people who are applying. So if you want the top of the funnel, right, the total number of applicants that you start with. And what I'm trying to get at here is, depending on how many people you start with, you need to have different processes, right? Just this flip of when are you calling them makes a difference. Now, again, with respect to sourcing, one trick that sort of we've discovered and now we recommend to people is all these job boards have a section where you're allowed to ask pre-screening questions. Most times these are questions like, what is your CTC, or what kind of a notice period are you serving? Will you be serving, right? We've actually sort of done a bit of a hack. These are actual questions that we have asked. This is on LinkedIn. This is on LinkedIn and this is on CutShort, right? For a product marketer role, we've given them a scenario and said, which marketing channel would be most effective, right? For a developer role, we've said something about a status code. For a designer role, we've asked a question like, how many customer testimonials are on a landing page? Okay, so this kind of pre-screening, what it does is, these are questions that should not take more than a minute to answer, right? This is not an assessment. I want to make it very clear, right? The question should be very easy to answer. It should be an objective question, right? The whole point of that exercise is, again, if you do something like LinkedIn and you get too many people applying for that role, you want to quickly decide if you want to shortlist them or not, right? And this one level of filtering is this pre-screening questions. And the objective nature of the question means you can quickly decide. For example, if I take this question, there's one answer to this. Okay, the answer is 502. If they don't get 502, then you can reject them, right? And it's also easy for the candidate because it doesn't take more than a minute to answer. And of course, the hiring team designs this question, right? If it's a question like CTC or notice period, you can do it. But obviously a question that's specific to the skill you're hiring for, the hiring team designs the question. And how do these questions help? It filters out all those candidates who are just applying randomly, right? And of course, as talent acquisition professionals, we know this. Lots of them, they don't even, like I said, they don't even know the name of the company they're applying for, and they would just apply. Having this extra step means that they can't just apply like that. They need to at least know the company that they're applying to, right? And it also tests either something technical, or it could even test something about the company. For example, if you ask a question like, how many testimonials on a landing page, it will force them to go to the website. It will force them to look at the website, right? So when you make the intro call, they already have context to what you work on. Otherwise, they will just apply and then you call them and it takes you 10 minutes to just tell them what to do, right? So this helps. And the other point is, if you have a process and the process gets increasingly longer, if a candidate cannot spend a minute on the first step, very unlikely that they will spend an hour or days on the other steps, right? So this is sort of signaling that if they don't want to spend even 1 minute, they're not going to spend a few hours. So don't spend time with that candidate, right? Again, remember, the point is you want to surface the most relevant candidates as soon as possible. And this is one trick that we've discovered that helps achieve that, right? And I easily get 50% filtering with this, right? So a lot of people apply, and when you go and look at the section where you've asked for the pre-screening question, many of them don't respond, and I ignore them, right? Because I know that they're not really committed to the role. They just applied without looking at what we do. So if they don't give us that sort of importance, I would say, let's reject them and move on. Let's not even consider them, right? Okay, so this is stage 1. So sourcing, and we said, okay, we have shortlisted the candidates. The next stage is the assessment stage, okay? And I am a big proponent of doing assessments. In fact, I'm such a big proponent of doing assessments that I've started a company based on it, right? That's how important I think doing an assessment is. And the whole point of Equip is to help you do this, right? Again, remember what I said. One of the principles I said earlier is the candidate should be spending more and more time as they progress through their application process. So at the pre-screening level, they're spending maybe a minute. The assessment should not take more than 20 minutes. Do not give them a large project, right? Give them an assessment that has maybe MCQs, maybe short text answers. Do not give them something that will take them 3 days. They will not do it, right? And the ones who do it are probably not the right candidates for you, right? Someone who really values their time and they're talking to multiple other people will not have the bandwidth to do this for you. So you want to be able to onboard them slowly, right? And so give them something that shouldn't take more than 20 minutes. Our customers love us for that, because on Equip, you can create an assessment, share it with candidates, and they can even take it on the phone, right? These are proper assessments on the phone. So we make it very easy for people to be able to do this, right? And many customers, when they start with us, they come to us for tech roles, right? So they're doing assessments only for tech roles, but you really should be doing it for non-tech roles as well. If you're hiring a marketer, there's no reason why you shouldn't test them on how to run Google Ads. If you're hiring someone as a customer support specialist, you really should be testing their communication skills, right? How many times have you looked at CVs where they say their English proficiency is expert, and then you talk to them and they can't even talk to you, right? You really want to have some way of filtering these people out. And so for non-tech as well, you should be using assessments. Okay, so this is about the process. So I talked to you a little bit about sourcing. I talked to you about job boards and pre-screening. And then I said you should use some sort of assessments for making it more seamless, right, for yourself. The other challenge we talked about at the beginning was that candidates may not be familiar with your brand, right? And so how do you overcome this? Now, one thing I would suggest is you should be introducing senior executives earlier in the process. Okay, I'm sure many of you may know about Stripe, right? So this CEO of Stripe was interviewing each of the first 100 employees until they were hired. For the first 100 employees, right? I think by employee 15 or so, Stripe was already a success. But he saw to it that the first 100 employees, he interviewed every single one of them. This doesn't happen very much, especially in Indian companies, right? All your senior executives want the best talent, but they don't want to do any work for it. My suggestion to you, if you're only doing recruitment and talent acquisition, is to talk to them and tell them, why don't you talk to the candidate? It doesn't have to be an interview. Early in the process, if they just do a 5-minute conversation with them, the candidate will feel much better, because the company may not have a brand to begin with because the startup, but the personal brand of the CEO or the VP of whichever department is going to compensate for it, right? So I would suggest that, again, it could just be a 5-minute thing, right? Maybe a round 1 or round 2, get someone senior involved. And again, think from the candidate's perspective, right? If someone senior is talking to you early, then it will feel like they care. And so they'll be willing to go the extra mile for you, right? And so even if the company doesn't have a brand, that the personal branding of the individual and the position they hold will compensate for it. Another suggestion I have is you must voluntarily tell candidates about other employees who have joined from sort of pedigree companies, right? So if you're a startup, but you've had someone from Flipkart join you, someone from Razorpay join you, make a deal about it, right? You would think that candidates will go and look at every company's LinkedIn profile and then look at all the teammates and their history. Of course, they won't. They'll apply to so many companies, right? And they may decide very early that this is a small company, I don't want to deal with them. So you must offer up this information in an earlier conversation itself and tell them about individuals, especially senior level individuals, executives who have had faith in the company enough that they quit a large company and decide to join you. And that will convince candidates that if someone that senior has been doing it, maybe there's something to the company, right? So you should talk about other employees here and do it voluntarily. The last suggestion on this slide, it comes to me from a founder, and he made a very interesting point. He said you should think of hiring as sales, right? With sales, you're typically selling to a customer. He said you should be selling to your candidate. And as a founder, he's done both. So I think he knows what he's talking about. And it's very important, because if you talk to someone in sales, and you should talk to someone in sales in your company, they will tell you about the psychology of things, right? How do you convince someone when you have very little material, right? How do you differentiate yourself? If all you're telling the candidate is, this is the package we offer, these are the number of holidays, this is the insurance provider we have, they're having the same conversation with every company they're talking to. How do you differentiate yourself, right? And that's what someone in sales and marketing does. They will try and differentiate your product from the other products in the market. The same way, you should start thinking of it as, what do I tell the candidate that makes it fresh, that makes it interesting? Even if they don't join, they should remember the company that they talk to, right? We've had so many candidates that we forget, but there are some, depending on the conversation that we've had with them, we remember. It should be something like that, right? So think of it as sales. And it also means something more. What you put up on your website, what you put up on your LinkedIn. It is not just customers who are looking at it. Anyone who wants to apply to your company, certainly they're going to look at your website, look at your blog, look at your LinkedIn. So you should actually work with the marketing team and try and see what you can post there that makes candidates want to join you, right? So you really should start thinking of it as sales. And so if you're running a blog, you think, if a candidate reads this blog, will that, excite them to enough to want to join us? So you should think of the fact that you don't have a brand, maybe a problem to begin with, but if you start doing this marketing, the brand around employment itself will build. And so you should really take some steps towards this. So this is about lack of a brand. The last challenge we talked of is candidates being wary of the risk associated with startups, right? So one thing I would like to point out is candidates don't usually say explicitly that they don't want to join you as it is risky. There's no upside to this. Why will a candidate tell you, I don't want to join you because you may let go of me down the line, right? I mean, it's almost rude to say that to you. So they may not say it explicitly, but candidates are definitely thinking about it. Okay. So you must address this even without them bringing it up. I mean, again, I'm talking about startups, and I think most people here are startups, but you should bring this up, especially in this environment. And even more so if the candidate has not worked at a startup, or if they've had a bad experience at a startup, it is your responsibility to address this sort of elephant in the room, right? Don't let it slide, because they will not tell you this is the reason. You may assume it's a different reason, maybe CTC or something. It may just be that it's because it's a startup, they don't want to join you. But don't do it directly. Don't go upfront and say, look, I know we're a startup, but we have a lot of money, because it's expected that you would say that. You will have to come up with some, if you want, tricks in such a way that you communicate that there is no risk, right? So don't do it upfront, but always in the back of your mind, remember that if a candidate has not worked at startups, it's difficult to convince them. They have to convince their family, they have to convince, if you want, society, that it's worth the risk. So put yourself in their position. And how do we do this? How do we address this, right? One thing you should do is you should make your hiring process explicit from the first call. So I've been a founder for a while now, and my earlier, when I was hiring earlier, I would not tell the candidate what the whole process is. To be honest, I wouldn't tell them because I myself didn't know, right? There was no process. I would do step one, and then depending on step one, I would come up with step two. And a candidate explicitly told me that it seems so random, right? He eventually joined Razorpay. Of course, Razorpay is a more stable company and so on, but his feedback was, you didn't even have a process. You didn't tell me what I have to do, right? And so since then, I've been explicit with candidates, right? I've said, okay, this round may last so long, we may take so much time to get back to you. So they have a full picture of what everything looks like. One, for their own benefit, but even more so, it will convince them that you're a mature entity, right? You're not just some, bunch of people working on some problem, right? You actually, the more you talk about process, the more you convince them that they can trust you, right? It's an established organization with rules. And so I would say, first of all itself, just make it very clear to them what the process is. Then this is related to what I said earlier. At every stage, make the candidate feel like they've unlocked one level. Okay, so that's why I said, you ask them a question and then you only care about the candidates you are going to shortlist, the ones whom you don't care about. So think from the candidate's perspective, right? They have answered a question and then you've said, now you're shortlisted. So the candidate thinks, okay, this is good. I think I can get into the company. And then you make them do the assessment. Again, you tell them, okay, you made it to the next round. So this progressively unlocking from one round to other makes them feel more confident that they will get through. And so they will put in the effort. Again, if you just dump everything that they need to do on the first call, they know you're doing it with every other candidate and they will not have the motivation to do anything, right? So we really do this where we do this, we make the task more difficult, but we also make the candidate feel like they are in that funnel, they're going through the funnel, right? So someone who has been shortlisted is more special than the ones we rejected. They need to feel that. and then they will get confidence that they will make it through to the end, and they will put in the effort for you, right? So you should be doing this more progressively. So last point, a couple of points around this is, even if most of your hiring is remote, I would suggest that you meet the candidate in person just before you make the offer. Okay, we do this at Equip, and it's been very useful for us. The last round before we make the offer, we invite them to our office. They spend a day with us. If they are in a different city, I mean, we are an in-person workplace. If they're in a different city, we cover the cost of their travel, of their stay. They spend a few hours with the people they're going to work with. They see how things function at the company, in the office. We take them out for a meal. So what this does is it gives them it's sort of a culture compatibility kind of check, right? So it makes them realize how we work. And it's been very useful because we've had cases where the candidate has come in and said, I don't want to join because of this reason. And that would not have been obvious if he had not come to the office, right? And vice versa. A candidate came in, she wanted to join, and we said, no, I don't think it's going to work out, right? Just meeting them in person is it gives you many more data points than talking to them on the phone or on Zoom, right? So of course, this comes with the cost, right? You have to cover their, monetary cost, you have to cover their travel, and in terms of time, you're spending time. But look at the flip side of it. Imagine that you hired them and they're not good. I mean, just the logistics of having to let them go, it is bad for them, it's bad for you. Your team has lost time. So I would really say that this is something that we do for every candidate, and highly encourage others to try this out, right? Even if it costs a bit, it may cost you, 10 or 20,000 for the travel, but you'd save lakhs down the line, right? So you should be doing this. Of course, don't do this, at large volumes. You spend a lot of money. Only candidates that everything else is checked out, and only you want to check the, culture and compatibility, call them into the office. And what we do is we tell candidates about this right at the first step. Okay, so they know that the final sort of process is them coming to the office, and they then realize that we're not just going to make an offer to 100 people and pick one of them, because we are actually investing time and money into bringing them to the office. So they know we're serious about it, right? And that's sort of related to talent maybe finding startup risky. If you do this, I don't mean do what BharatPe did and give them BMW bikes, right? I'm not saying do what Cred did or BharatPe did in 21, right? I'm not talking about that at all. What I'm saying is do something that actually brings in some, utility, brings in some value. We don't give away laptops. We don't give them BMW bikes. We don't give them IPL tickets, right? We buy them one Indigo airline ticket from Delhi to Bangalore, and we take them back, let them go back, and we buy them a meal. That's all. And all of this is something that's very useful to us and to them, right? And the fact that we're doing this gives them confidence that, again, we're a serious organization. Finally, related to point number 3, what this has also done is it establishes a personal connection with them, right? Again, back in 21, we were not doing this, and we've had candidates who ghosted, right? Sign the offer letter, last day, don't turn up. I'm sure every one of you here has had this experience. Since we started doing this, what has happened is candidates, I think, the minute they come down and they talk to you one-on-one, they may not join you, but it's clear to them that you're actually trying to do something, right? You're trying to build a company, you're trying to do something, they meet the team. And so if they're not going to join, they'll tell you right away. They will not make you wait the full 2 months, right? And then ghost you. We've not had a single person ghost us since, right? So I think this is another way, another advantage of doing something like this. This all the points that, like I said, right? I talked about 3 specific hiring challenges, and I've talked about tips and tricks and best practices to solve them, or at least reduce them to the extent possible. I would just summarize all that I've said up to now. One, I've said you need to be using pre-screening questions, both job boards as well as as well as you should really be using automated assessments. The other thing I said is introduce senior executives early in the process, so they feel confident and they feel valued. Then I'm saying assign tasks that are increasingly difficult. Don't dump a bunch of tasks right at the beginning. They should feel like they're unlocking different levels, and they should feel progressively more confident about their chances at the company, and then they will do what you expect them to do. And finally, I've said you should invite the candidates to meet you in person, right? And I think this has a whole set of advantages that you would not know until you actually tried it out.